It is a tragic story.
I never found that to be true.
There are accusations that are so absolutely flagrantly lies.
The Golden Age boasts of many talented and charming actors, but amongst them are men who, before or even during their fame, had compromised their dignity for comfort. From actors who openly confessed their sexy lifestyles to those who crushed under the secrets they harbored, number 7 on this list would especially leave you speechless. Join us as we uncover 25 Golden Age male actors who were actually prostitutes. Number 25. Richard Chamberlain. Before he ever wore a white coat on TV, Richard Chamberlain was already learning and practicing a different kind of bedside manner. But it didn't happen in a hospital. It happened on a 60-foot yacht in Marina del Rey. Fresh out of UCLA, broke, and searching for a break, Richard Chamberlain was invited on weekend sailing trips. But these trips weren't normal, and a lot of things happened there. Richard was smart, and he wanted to keep track of all the favors he had ever received. So in a little notebook that looked like it was about sailing knots, Richard wrote all about them, from voice lessons to blazers. His agent used sailing words as secret signals. A bowline meant it was time for drinks with a wealthy host. A clove hitch meant the night would last until morning. Even decades later, when he had made his name and grown old, he still measured his gratitude like it was medicine, and behind his smile, there seemed to be something he was always holding back. Although not at sea, the next gentleman on the list also mastered diplomacy at tables where charm could fund destiny. Number 24. John Gavin. Picture a 1956 drawing room with heavy curtains and a smoky haze, where senators and studio lawyers sit around a poker table stacked with more money than John Gavin made in a year. Fresh from the Navy and flat broke, John didn't have cash to gamble, but he had charm and perfect manners, so he simply poured drinks, listened well, and waited for the right moment to speak. And by the time he left, he was rich in connections that could change his future. Years later, those same skills he used at poker tables led him to an ambassadorship in Mexico. Yet John's slyness meets its match in the dashing swashbuckler next, an idol whose private dinners swung sharper than any on-screen sword. Number 23. Tyrone Power. Long before Tyrone Power fenced villains on the big screen, he was fencing something else in Depression-era New York. Depression. Work was terribly scarce, and as Tyrone grew desperate, he began to accept invitations to private suppers with rich movie patrons. The food was always fine, but the real reward came in checks after Tyrone had played his part and served himself as dessert. He was able to buy his fencing lessons and pay his mother's medical bills. By the time The Mark of Zorro lit up theaters, all the audience saw was a hero in a shining costume. They never knew that every swing of his blade was courtesy of a benefactor that was better left unnamed. And that was the illusion Tyrone Power mastered. But Hollywood's greatest illusions didn't stop with him. Next up, Cary Grant, whose Park Avenue patronage turned the ultimate gentleman into something very different behind closed doors. Number 22. Cary Grant. Before the world knew him as Cary Grant, he was Archie Leach, an acrobat scraping by in London. He shared a cramped attic in Chelsea while chasing dreams that felt too far away. Then came his chance. A wealthy widow on Park Avenue offered him more than a roof and meals. She was willing to give him lessons on proper etiquette and how to charm his way into any room. All Cary needed to do was to dance and satisfy her behind curtains. For Cary, that was a step closer to his dream, so he gave in, and that widow's money bought him the life that Hollywood only added the final touches to. When the audience saw Cary, he seemed like a man of noble birth. His illusioned life was so great that the world came to adore him as such. But Cary's story stands no chance to the next story about an immigrant dancer who tangoed straight from Fifth Avenue patronage into global hysteria. Number 21. Rudolph Valentino. Just before perfume ads made him a dream, Rodolfo Guglielmi washed dishes in New York cafes. However, scrubbing plates didn't pay much. At least not as much as the lonely widows who tipped so much for a dance. It started one night when a society matron slipped him $2 to tango in a rented parlor. By dawn, she had booked him for a weekend trip with a train ticket and an envelope of cash. Those arrangements bought him all he needed to go from being Rodolfo to becoming the world's first great screen lover, Rudolph Valentino. Yet even Valentino's charming face stood no chance next to the teen idol who carried a shoebox ledger and a shadow that finally caught him in a dark alley. Number 20. Sal Mineo. At 17, Sal Mineo was already famously known as the baby-faced rebel who stood beside James Dean. But while his fame was quick, the money wasn't. Instead, the checks arrived slower than rent came. Then he found another way to earn in secret. It was through a secret phone circuit that sent him to so-called private company calls at $50 a visit. Sal was finally making money, and in a battered shoebox, he wrote down every client's initial and put every cash roll in there. It was his little secret. Even his mom thought the box held letters from his fans, until one day when his secret haunted him to death. It was in 1976. The killer stabbed him just beneath his ribcage and disappeared. The police called it a robbery. However, that shoebox was the first thing they grabbed. Next, meet the Irish roughneck who learned to survive on grinning and speaking easily long before he drew a gun on screen. Number 19. George Maharis. Back in the 1950s, broke and hungry Maharis took chauffeur jobs set up by Hollywood fixers. But these drives often ended at hillside mansions where powerful men would introduce themselves and eventually seal the night with envelopes of cash. For a while, it all worked out for George. Then came May 1967. A Vice Squad raid snapped a photo no studio could hide. Headlines screamed, "Indecency." And as sponsors fled, the network replaced him quicker than it takes to swap a flat tire. George took a mugshot with his face void of emotions. It was ironic to his usual charming smile. Even though he moved on, it was unforgettable. But George's tragedy is not as heartbreaking as the next actor whose allowance bankrolled a Porsche that had him crashing toward destiny. Number 18. James Dean. Farm boy Jimmy Dean arrived in New York, so broke that he flirted just to afford hash browns. Then radio director Rogers Brackett stepped in with mentorship and a lot more that was held in secret. Soon he had a Manhattan loft and received a monthly envelope of cash that James joked was fatter than his agent's. With one more check, he bought him the silver Porsche, and it was the same car that ended his life at 85 miles per hour. But before he died, James was already counting the cost of every dollar he borrowed. And the next tale shows how crusty old Hollywood could punish a heartthrob whose private midnight calls finally gave greed an opening for blood. Number 17. Ramon Navarro. Audiences fell for him the moment his coal-ringed stare lit up Ben-Hur in 1925. Off-screen, the Mexican-born Jose Ramon Samaniego learned fast that studio day wages didn't cover hunger at sunset. So in what was disguised as music evenings in Beverly Hills mansions, Ramon made his fortune. Fast forward to Halloween, 1968. Two robbers chasing their own wealth tied the 69-year-old Ramon on his bed and beat him for a fortune that never existed. While news called it a simple burglary, insiders knew better. The killers were after his hidden wages. Number 16. Farley Granger. Before Hitchcock framed his wide, anxious eyes in Rope, 20-year-old Farley Granger was broke, sharing a cold water flat. So when a famous Broadway producer offered rescue in exchange for a forever silence, he gladly took it. The next set of actors in the list are the ones whose canyon cookouts kept both their fridges and Hollywood rumor mills fully stocked. Number 15. Tab Hunter. When Agent Henry Wilson saw a broke Merle Johnson Jr. sleeping on an army cot and struggling to afford oatmeal, he saw a potential. He picked him, cleaned him up, and swept him into canyon cookouts where powerful men judged posture. He bought orthodontics and changed his name to Tab Hunter. Even when Hollywood sold him as all-American purity, Tab never forgot how much it cost him to get there. And the next star's loyalty pact would cost far more. Number 14. George Nader. Before Robot Monster turned into a midnight joke, George Nader was Henry Wilson's most faithful student. Wilson trained him in everything, like how to laugh and how to repay debts that no one dared to mention. From poolside chats to late-night canyon drives, George met with producers who promised him a lot in exchange for an hour of Boy Scout charm. The trade-off paid his bills and bought him a shiny car, but it robbed him of something greater, the chance to ever see his name on top of a marquee. As rumors circled like vultures, Universal shipped him overseas, burying him in cheap spy thrillers instead of Hollywood blockbusters. Even though that loyalty kept him afloat for a time, it also chained him down. But he was not the only one to be mentored by Henry Wilson, even though this next actor was able to come out unscathed. Number 13. Guy Madison. Fresh off a Wyoming ranch, Guy Madison landed in 1944 with a Marine stride and no cash. Agent Henry Wilson ushered him into Benedict Canyon cookouts where steaks cooked and jazz played into midnight. Like the others, Guy was trained to be charming, and he did an excellent job at it. He'd pocket envelopes and vanish before sunrise to pay for acting lessons and his typical pastel shirts that sold him as a clean-cut cowboy. With his grin on cereal boxes, viewers never knew the things he had traded it for. Let's move on to the next boy with a grin that ruled every jukebox in America. Number 12. Troy Donahue. 2 years before A Summer Place was all over screens, Merle Johnson Jr. was couch surfing with more sand than coins in his pockets. Henry Wilson again cracked open the Canyon Party circuit, and one Catalina weekend bought Troy the convertible that became his calling card. He rode each favor like a wave, never thinking the tide would crash, and if you watch closely, you'll see a flicker calculating rent before cut. Number 11. Brad Dexter. Before he rode with the Magnificent Seven, Brad Dexter washed silverware in a bare chop house where producers ordered porterhouse and desserts not listed on any menu. He knew that just one late-night scotch pour could cover a week's rent, and 2 could buy him another night of acting lessons in a converted barn behind Paramount. So he learned the art of people-pleasing. Number 10. Don Murray. Years before Bus Stop paired him with Marilyn, Don Murray slept in a one-room walk-up where the Roaches applauded his monologues. Rent was relentless until a well-heeled arts patron offered him an easier stage. He just had to escort her to symphony halls and beam politely as Mozart played. Don tracked the math in his head and accepted. When the spotlight finally found him, reporters praised his innate decency, but they never saw the ledger he fed to the trash can fire the night his name hit print. Number 9. Van Johnson. Hollywood sold Van Johnson as the wartime boy next door. He had freckles and his hair parted like a Sunday hymn. But when he arrived in Los Angeles, he came with only optimism and $13. He needed a shortcut, and a private music lover offered him. He just had to charm gray-haired men who would slip envelopes into his pocket. So Van accepted without asking any questions. Ever the bookkeeper, Van jotted every favor in a tiny spiral pad, balancing gratitude against dignity. But when MGM finally dressed him in khaki over Tokyo, the notebooks vanished, but the habit could never disappear forever. Number 8. Anthony Perkins. 23-year-old Anthony Perkins had to wander Hollywood streets with exactly $9 because casting calls didn't cover rent. So when friends guided him to discreet cocktail parties where older patrons shared bedrooms, for a shy smile, he obliged, but kept every detail in a ledger. But even Anthony's anxious ledger can't match the raw wound behind our next icon's haunted eyes that carried the full cost of survival onto every frame he ever touched. Number 7. Montgomery Clift. In 1942, Monty Clift walked around Manhattan rehearsal halls with rich talent but an empty wallet. Rescue came from a Park Avenue arts patron who offered him a deal: recite Shakespeare by firelight and stay for brandy-laced early mornings. He took the deal. After his near-fatal car crash in 1956, studios worried if scar tissue would ruin his marketability. Monty feared something else, that the swelling might reveal debts carved far deeper than skin. Number 6. Scotty Bowers. If one pulled into 5777 Hollywood Boulevard in 1948 and asked for a fill-up, Marine veteran Scotty Bowers might lean through the window with a grin that promised more than premium or regular. For $20 and a nod toward the payphone, he could arrange the company of an eager young actor or chorus boy. Sometimes he joined the passenger seat himself, but more often he played maestro-matching hungry dreamers with silver-haired studio execs and lonely A-listers who wanted no scandal. By the time Full Service hit shelves decades later, attorneys scrambled. but private diaries and estate letters confirmed it all, that Scotty had made a whole industry out of desire. Number 5. Dennis Hopper. Before Easy Rider launched him into fame, 19-year-old Dennis Hopper hustled the downtown art scene, crashing fancy occasions where abstract canvases dried on clothespins. The unspoken rule was to bring excitement if he wanted to leave with rent. It was an arrangement that worked great for Dennis. Number 4. John Ireland. In his early days, John Ireland was just a lanky immigrant pounding New York sidewalks until his shoes wore thin. A stagehand tipped him to a backdoor survival plan: greet Broadway producers at speakeasy doors, sip poor scotch with a wink, and linger past last call doing errands no playbill would ever list. By the time Hollywood made him famous, John had mastered a harder weapon: the stare of a kid who had counted every dollar against his own dignity. Let's go to the next icon who managed to outsmart the system. Number 3. William Haynes. Flashback to the late 1920s. MGM's top male draw was a wisecracking Virginia farm boy named Billy Haynes. Haynes survived New York by renting his charm to theater patrons who tipped more than any chorus line paycheck. Then studio boss Louis B. Mayer gave an ultimatum: ditch your longtime partner and marry a starlet or lose everything. He thought he had caught William in a fishnet, but William just laughed and walked out. He turned survival skills into a new empire where he designed palaces for Joan Crawford and even Mayer himself. Number 2. Jack Wrangler. Long before his name was across Times Square, young Jack Wrangler was just another broke drama student couch-surfing in West Hollywood. He paid the phone bill by attending canyon parties, where company meant conversation until sunrise and sometimes longer. But then he did what no one else on tonight's list dared. He owned it. Instead of hiding the midnight work, Jack spun it all into a brand, while Hollywood gasped. He sold tickets to truths others kept under lock and key, laughing that honesty was cheaper than hush money. Number 1. Rock Hudson. Long before the cameras immortalized his flawless jaw, Rock Hudson had walked every shadowed path the other men on our list once did. He hustled at canyon parties, charmed moguls, counted favors in his head like a ledger, and endured discreet patronage to cover rent and lessons. Born Roy Fitzgerald, Rock Hudson arrived in Los Angeles with 14 cents and a borrowed tuxedo. By day, Agent Henry Wilson drilled him to fit the lifestyle. By night, Rock was dispatched to poolside parties. Let's give it up for the man who did it all. Which of these 25 men did you not expect to see on this list? Share your thoughts with us in the comment section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.